Hello everyone, this is Amit Latigra. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how can we swap two numbers using a Python programming. So swapping of numbers, what exactly it means? Say I want two numbers from the user. Here if user is entering 15 as number 1 and 25 as number 2, this will be the input of my program. So in output, what I want to swap both the numbers. Value of number 1, I want it in number 2. Value of number 2, I want it in number 1. So in output, number 1 becomes 25 and number 2 becomes 15. So this is the basic idea. This program we can write in multiple ways. I'm going to use two techniques here, which I will demonstrate in subsequent part of this video. So I encourage you to watch this video till end to get an idea about both the methods. So let's begin with first technique. And first technique is pretty simple. How can we swap these two numbers? Let's do some brainstorming to get an idea. Say my number 1 and number 2 are 15 and 25 respectively. Now here, if I assign 25 to number 1, then 15 will be lost. Why? Because I'm going to overwrite the values. What I mean to say is, if we write, say, number 1 is 25, or let's go to the deeper one. Say number 1 is 15 and number 2 is 25. This is the initial situation. If I assign value of number 2 to number 1, that is 25, by writing a statement like this, then what will happen? Say this is my memory space represented as number 1 and this is as number 2. So initial values are 15 and 25 for these two statements. Now for statement 3, number 1 is equal to number 2. So what exactly I am doing? Value of number 2, I am assigning to number 1. So here I am erasing the value of number 1, that is 15, and I am assigning 25. So in this case, number 1 becomes 25, but we are losing the value of number 1, original value of number 1, that is 15. So if we assign in this way, it will not work. So what is the solution? Solution is, what if we store this 15 somewhere before assigning value of number 2? What if we keep it as a backup here? So this 15, if we are keeping somewhere, and then if we assign value of number 2 to number 1, like we did earlier, then somewhere we are having reference of 15. And eventually this 15 we can place it in number 2. So here this 25 ultimately replaced with 50. So this is a very simple technique, and this block somewhere we can represent as temporary block as a third variable. So this technique is very simple. How it works? It works by assigning value of number 2 to number 1, but before that storing number 1 in temporary variable and then assigning that value back to number 2. So this is a very basic way. Using a temporary variable, using a third variable, we can swap two numbers. How? So temporary variable first becomes as number 1. Then we can store value of number 2 to number 1. And to get the value of number 1, whatever the original value, in number 2, we can use temporary variable. So this is a very simple technique, swapping of two numbers using a temporary or a third variable. Let's try to do it practically here in Python. Let's say number 1, to take an input, we can use input statement, enter number 1. Similar way, let's take an input for number 2. Now, let's print a message using a print statement before swapping a value. So before swap, value of number 1 is, let's say number 1, and number 2 is, let's print value of number 2. Now let's have temporary variable and let's keep backup of number 1 here. Number 1, let's replace it with number 2, and number 2, let's store value of number 1, which is existing temporary variable, and let's print again a message that is after swap. This is before swap and this is after swap, both the values. Let's save this program. Let's go to the command prompt and let's compile a program. Let's execute a program. Enter number 1, say 15, number 2, 25. So before swap, number 1 is 15, number 2 is 25. After swap, we've changed the values. Number 1 is now 25 and number 2 is 15. So this is basic technique, as I discussed earlier, taking a temporary variable and swapping the values. Now, second possible way, what if we don't take this temporary variable? Here we are taking one more variable and then internally we are changing the values. Is there any other way to swap the two numbers without using the temporary variable? Answer is yes, there are again multiple ways, and the basic is through arithmetic operators, addition and subtraction. What I mean to say here is, let's consider the same scenario. Number 1, say 15, number 2 is 25. I want to swap both the values. So this can be done using normal addition and subtraction as well. How? Let's understand the scenario first. What if we add both the values together, that is 15 and 25. So 15 plus 25, result is 40. Now from this 40, if we subtract 15, then value is 25. And from this 40, if we subtract 25, value is 15. What I mean to say is, we are adding both the numbers together. And of course, if we subtract any one value, we are getting the another value. So let's use the same concept here. What if we add number 1 and number 2 together? So here number 1 is 15, number 2 is 25. If we add it together, result we are storing in number 1 that is 40. So after this, we are replacing value of number 1 from 15 to 40. Now, what if we subtract 25 from 40? So answer is 15, which is the original value of number 1. That we want it in number 2. So what if we are doing basic arithmetic operation like this? From number 1, let's subtract number 2. So what is now number 1? That is 40. From 40, what we are subtracting? Number 2, that is 25. So what we are storing in number 2? That is 15. So we are replacing now 25 with 15, which is the original value of number 1. What we require is second value, original value of number 2, that is 25, back in number 1. So ultimately it is a swapping of both numbers. So now number 2 is 15. Number 1 is still 40. So what if we subtract 15 from 40? So answer is 25. That is the original value of number 2, which we require in number 1. So let's try to subtract number 1, which is 40. Number 2, that is 15. So we are trying to subtract 15 from 40. So that we are storing in number 1, that is 25, and it is the original value of number 2. So we are replacing now 40 with 25. So after these arithmetic operations, what we are having? Number 1 is 25, number 2 is 15, and it is nothing but the original values of number 1 and number 2. Before swapping, number 1 was 15, number 2 was 25. After these three arithmetic statements, number 1 becomes 25 and number 2 becomes 15. So this is a simple method to swap both the numbers without using third variable. So let's execute the same thing in Python. This is our program. Here what we require, we need to add number 1 and number 2. Then we are storing value of number 1, original value, in number 2 by subtracting a number 2 from the addition values. And then we are storing value of number 2 in number 1 back. If we do this, then we are in a position to swap both the numbers. Still, to execute this program, we need to modify a program a little bit. How? Let me show you through an example. This program I am executing. I'm entering value of number 1 is 20, number 2 is 40, but it will not work. It is giving me an error that subtraction minus is not possible in string. What exactly it is? Whenever we are using plus, then it is concatenating both the values. What I mean to say is here, if 10 is number 1 is 10 and number 2 is 20, then if number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20. If I write 10 plus 20 in the way like number 1 plus number 2, then it is going to merge both the values because it considers it as a string. What I need to tell to my program that this is not string, this 20 and 40, this is rather integer values. Let's comment this code for a time being to get an idea what I'm saying. Let's print value of number 1 after doing this arithmetic operation. Let's combine program. Number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20. So here if you can check, it is going to merge both the values, that is 10 20, not 10 plus 20, that is 30. To do this, we need to convert this value to integer from a string. So we require typecasting. So let's convert it into a number using integer, and let's check an output now. 10 and 20. So now result is 30. Let's uncomment the code. Let's save. And now let's check an output. Number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20. Before swap, original values is 10 and 20. After swap, it is 20 and 10. So in this program, I demonstrated how can we swap two numbers using both the methods, either using a third temporary variable or without using third variable through basic addition and subtraction. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching this video. Have a good time ahead.